I used to think every child grew up in a family where fairness was a luxury, until I realized what I experienced wasn't a mistake, it was intentional. One time I asked my mom why my younger brother got a brand new car on his 16th birthday, while I only got a cheap cake and a few handwritten cards. She just gave a half smile and said, "Because he needs it more than you." What was I supposed to feel? Sad? Angry? Or should I smile and pretend I was okay, like I had done for years? If there's one thing that hardened my heart over time, it's blatant favoritism, the kind that shows up in every meal, every gift, every glance. My name is Ivy, and this is the story of how my family taught me to be the one left out, during the very years I should have been loved like a normal daughter. For as long as I can remember, everything in our house revolved around Evan, my younger brother. He's only 2 years younger than me, but he was always treated like the most precious gift the universe ever gave my parents. Every holiday, birthday, academic achievement, even small things like finishing his homework, became a reason for my parents to throw a celebration for Evan. Meanwhile, I could ace a brutal exam and get nothing but a dismissive nod and their go-to phrase, "Yeah, it's nice when girls do well in school." I still remember Christmas when I was 8. Evan unwrapped his gift and shouted with excitement when he saw a brand new, shiny red Nintendo Switch with a pile of games. My mom clapped like she'd just witnessed her son win a Nobel Prize. And me? I got a plain white t-shirt, no brand, slightly wrinkled, with a hammer printed on the chest. "I think it's cute, suits you," she said, completely unaware of the tears I was holding back. I gave a weak smile, said thank you, and quietly brought the shirt up to my room. I sat by the window all morning, holding that shirt, wondering if I had done something wrong. But I hadn't. I just wasn't Evan. When I turned 16, I dreamed of getting an old car to drive to school and my part-time job. I spent the whole summer working as a waitress at a small-town bakery, saving every penny. Evan? He was gifted a brand new navy blue Mazda CX-5 with a giant red bow on the hood like those car commercials. My dad patted him on the back and said, "Congrats to the man of the house." When I asked if I could get some help too, my mom frowned. "Ivy, you're a girl, you can take the bus. You should save for college instead." So I kept walking, or catching the 6 a.m. bus to make it to my shift at the bakery, while Evan drove around town like an unthroned king. Even school wasn't any better. When I got accepted into a community college, after doing all the paperwork, scholarship hunting, and interviews by myself, my parents just brushed it off. I wasn't expecting a big celebration, just a genuine congratulations. But no. All she said was, "That's good. But don't pick a useless major, okay? Study something practical so you can get a job." Meanwhile, when Evan got into a private college that cost over $60,000 a year, they threw a backyard BBQ, invited the neighbors, and hung up a banner that read, "Evan, we're proud of you." I stood there by the cold salad table, picking at lettuce while trying to swallow the bitterness rising in my throat. Once, I overheard my mom on the phone with my aunt. "Ivy's really independent. She doesn't need much. But Evan needs a boost." It was like my sacrifices were expected, and Evan was entitled to be coddled no matter what. They always said I was strong, but no one understood that my strength was just armor to cover up the loneliness and feeling of being invisible. I'd gotten through everything on my own, from freezing night shifts at the cafe to student loans no one guided me through. I never asked for much. Just a little recognition, a hug, a simple, "I'm proud of you." But they never came. Every time Evan was praised, I saw my mom's eyes light up. The way she looked at me felt as cold as the kitchen wall. I started wondering if I was even their biological child. If I disappeared, would they notice? I learned how to be quiet. I didn't complain. I didn't get angry. I just quietly piled everything up inside, piece by piece, until it became a heavy stone pressing on my chest. That's what made me grow up fast. That's what made me stop believing in the phrase, "family is everything." Because if that were true, then why did I always feel like the extra? I used to think that if I tried harder they'd finally see me, but now I know, Some people will never look, even when you're standing right in front of them. And me? I'm done standing there waiting. I still remember the day Evan graduated college like it happened yesterday. A bright spring day, full of sunshine, full of laughter, and full of invisible slaps to my face. They threw him a party so big, the whole neighborhood noticed. My parents rented a fancy Italian restaurant downtown, hired a DJ, had confetti, a 3-tier cake with his college's logo on it, and a 10-foot-long banner. Congrats, Evan, the pride of our family. They invited over 80 people, including relatives I thought were dead. My mom wore a new dress, did her makeup like it was her wedding day, and my dad kept toasting guests, bragging again and again about the most successful son in New Hampshire. I stood by the buffet, wearing last year's dress, nodding along like a background extra, watching everyone cheer for my younger brother, like he'd just cured cancer. When Evan got up to give his speech, my parents handed him a small box wrapped in silver paper with a red ribbon. I still remember the exact moment he opened it. The whole room erupted. A key. A brand new house in the suburbs, white with black trim, a backyard, a BBQ grill, and even a hot tub. Something my mom once said was too extravagant when I mentioned it. "You deserve this, Evan," my mom said through tears, her voice breaking like she was handing over her soul to her son. "We're so proud of you. You are the future of this family." I tried to swallow the dry piece of meat in my mouth, feeling like I was being choked by bare hands. A year later, it was my turn to graduate. No party, no guests, no banner, no DJ. Just a quiet dinner at a cheap chain restaurant next to a gas station. The table was sticky with sauce, and the plastic chairs creaked every time I moved. My mom sat across from me, pulled a thin white envelope from her purse, and smiled, as if it contained a 6-figure check. "Here you go," she said, unusually cheerful. "A special graduation gift." I opened the envelope. A scratch-off lottery ticket. A $2 purple one with a bear on it and the words, "Lucky Claw, everyone wins." I looked up, thinking I had to be dreaming. "We thought it'd be fun if you won," my mom said, winking. "You never know, right?" I glanced at my dad. He just shrugged, shoved another fry into his mouth and said, as if I was asking too much, "We already spent quite a bit on Evan, honey, can't keep throwing money around." I laughed, a dry, hollow, bitter laugh. There's no word that can fully describe what I felt at that moment, a mix of pain, humiliation, and despair. I was trying to stay upright in a family that constantly pushed me to the edge. And now, they tossed me a lottery ticket like they were saying, "Want a future? Try your luck." I didn't say another word during the whole dinner. I ate the cold meat sauce pasta, drained my watery soda, forced a smile, said thank you, and walked out of the restaurant like a shadow. On the way home, I shoved the ticket into my pocket without even looking at it again. That night, I returned to my tiny rented room. A monthly lease, cheap, because it had a leaking roof and mold climbing the walls. A room just big enough for a single bed, a rickety wooden desk, and a crooked bookshelf. The lottery ticket sat on the table for weeks, untouched. Every time I walked past, I looked at it like it was living proof of their contempt. I didn't cry. I just felt like something inside me had died, a part of me that once longed to be seen, loved, and treated fairly. I understood then, no matter what I did, no matter how much I achieved, in their eyes, I was just Evan's shadow. I started cutting ties, little by little. I began turning down dinner invitations, stopped replying to the family group chat, skipped the BBQs my mom still threw every month for Dad's golf buddies. I moved out of town to a smaller city, renting a run-down third-floor apartment, where the wooden stairs creaked with every step. By day, I worked in a marketing office for a lousy paycheck, staring at a screen for 9 hours. At night, I washed dishes in a tiny Mexican restaurant, hands cracked from dish soap, body reeking of leftover food after every shift. I had nothing but my hands, and my will. Meanwhile, Evan lived like a prince. He constantly posted on Facebook. Morning coffee, afternoon golf. New car, new house, a blonde, blue-eyed fiancé who'd just been proposed to with a diamond ring the size of a grape. My parents commented under every post, "So proud of you, sweetie, love you more than anything." And me? No one asked how I was doing, what I ate, where I slept. Not a word, not a message, not a single call. And maybe that was for the best. I didn't need their pity. I needed freedom. But one night, when I got home after a dishwashing shift at 1 a.m., my hands numb from the cold, I saw the lottery ticket still sitting in the kitchen drawer, covered in dust. Something pushed me to pick it up. Not because I thought I'd win, but because I needed a reminder of just how little I meant to them. I stood there in the dark kitchen, one hand holding a coin, the other trembling from exhaustion. I started scratching off the silver coating, one line at a time, and then, I hadn't meant to scratch that ticket. Really? After everything that had happened, it was just a crumpled, dusty piece of paper in a drawer, a stain on my memory. A bitter reminder that to my parents, my worth was exactly $2. But that night, after coming home from a nearly 2 a.m. shift, my body aching, my head spinning from kitchen smoke, I don't know why I did it. Maybe out of exhaustion, maybe some stupid impulse. Or maybe I just wanted to see myself lose one last time, to finally close the door on all my foolish hopes. I turned on the kitchen light, pulled the ticket out from under old receipts and scratched it. Each number appeared, one line after another. I expected nothing. But then, 8, 15, 20, 27, 34, 42, 56. I froze. My eyes locked onto the numbers, my heart pounding like a war drum. I grabbed my phone, opened the official New Hampshire lottery website, compared the numbers. 8, 15, 27, 32, 56. They matched every single number. I read it over and over like I'd lost my mind. Congratulations, you've won the jackpot, $134 million. I screamed. Not a joyful scream, it was a choked howl, like someone had hurled me from a pit straight onto a mountaintop in a single second. I collapsed onto the kitchen floor, hands trembling, body ice cold even though I had 2 layers on. 134 million. 134 million. That number echoed in my head like a dangerous mantra. I didn't sleep that night. But I didn't tell anyone either. Not a soul, especially not my family. I knew them too well. The moment they heard the words lottery winner, they'd circle like vultures, clinging, manipulative, relentless. Evan would say he deserved a share as the brother. My mom would sob about how family should share everything, and my dad would lecture me about responsibility. No, not this time. The next morning I Googled, "What to do when you win the lottery?" I read dozens of articles, watched every interview with past winners. Most ended in ruined homes and empty bank accounts because they couldn't keep quiet. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. I hired a financial advisor named Carol Winters, a middle-aged black woman with a deep, calm voice, sharp eyes, and over 20 years of experience in investment. She met me in a quiet office in the city's financial district. I wore a hoodie, a baseball cap, hands still shaking as I handed over the photographed and verified ticket. Carol looked at me for a long moment and said, slowly, "First, Ivy. Don't tell anyone, no friends, no neighbors, no family, no one." I nodded, eyes fixed on my clenched hands. "Second, you'll need a legal entity to claim the money anonymously. We'll create a limited liability company, an LLC, and it'll be listed as the recipient." 3 weeks later, I officially received the post-tax winnings, about $82 million. I didn't bring home a suitcase of cash. I didn't become a new person overnight. But I changed direction. A turning point. No fireworks, no noise. Just a girl who had always been overlooked, now holding her future in her own hands. I paid off my student loans, over $67,000. I quit my job at the Mexican restaurant, hugged Mrs. Linda, the elderly owner who always saved me an extra plate, and left her an envelope with a $5,000 farewell tip. She cried. I didn't. I bought a silver Tesla Model Y, not to show off, but because I wanted to feel safe, quiet, modern. I drove it to my old marketing office job, parked in the same lot as always. When my co-workers gathered around to ask, I just smiled. I've been saving up for a long time. No one suspected a thing. Because who would think the girl eating cold sandwiches at lunch and falling asleep in the print room from exhaustion was a millionaire? But the biggest change was the house. I bought a small but elegant villa in a quiet neighborhood outside Concord, New Hampshire. It had tall glass windows that let in sunlight, a backyard swing, an open kitchen with sleek black granite countertops, and a reading room with a window overlooking the lake. Everything was tasteful, quiet, understated. The only thing that made me laugh. It cost twice as much as the house my parents gave Evan. And they had no idea I lived here. They still thought I was in that crumbling apartment, barely getting by, working and whining and scraping to survive. They still messaged in the family group chat. Evan just painted the kitchen. Doesn't it look amazing? Or, I baked cookies for Evan, mailing them over. I read it. But I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I understood they only cared when there was something to take. One afternoon, I sat on the balcony, hands wrapped around a mug of hot coffee, watching the orange sunset glaze the neighborhood. I no longer shook. No longer cried over ignored messages. No longer begged them to love me the way I once had. I didn't need that anymore. I had freedom. I had money. I had peace. But I also knew the game wasn't over. All it would take was one slip, one careless word, one wrongly tagged photo. And they'd know. And when they did, they'd come back, with hopeful eyes, with promises like family is forever, with hands ready to take. I sipped my coffee, eyes distant. That night, I dreamed Evan was standing at my door, holding a sign that said, "Assist, just share a little." I jolted awake, heart pounding, shirt soaked in sweat. No, I wouldn't let that happen. I would prepare. I would protect myself. And I wouldn't give them a single cent if they still saw me as invisible. I thought I'd hidden it well enough. No photos. No check-ins. No car selfies. Not a single clue that I'd shed the skin of a burnt-out waitress with calloused hands and a fraying purse. But secrets are like blood. No matter how tightly you bandage them, once they leak, the scent spreads. The rumors began like a cold wind slipping under the door. A message from Lila, an old high school classmate. "You moved to Oak Hollow? I saw you driving a silver Tesla around there." My heart clenched. Just once. One time I stopped by the local grocery store for artisan bread and whole roasted coffee beans. I parked in a hidden corner, wore sunglasses, walked fast like someone was tailing me. And still, I got spotted. One person saw. Then 2 people knew. And then, my mom called. "Ivy, honey, it's been so long. How have you been?" Chills down my spine. She hadn't called in months. Not since I disappeared from family gatherings. No check-ins, no messages, no birthdays, no Thanksgiving. And now, her voice was sweet as syrup. I answered curtly, keeping my distance. But she didn't give up. "Are you free this week? Mom and Dad really miss you. How about coming home for dinner on Sunday night? Evan will be there too, and Emma. You know, his fiancée?" I should have hung up. I should have blocked the number. But I didn't. Because part of me, the part that hadn't been completely crushed, wanted to know. What were they going to pull next? Sunday night I drove to my parents' house in an old rental car I got just for camouflage. I didn't want the silver Tesla showing up as a sign that things had changed. The old house looked the same. Peeling paint on the outside, the worn-out welcome doormat, and the smell of grilled meat hanging in the air. But inside it was strangely different. My parents greeted me with smiles so bright they felt fake. My dad patted me on the shoulder 3 times, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. Mom hugged me unusually long, her hands cold and reeking of perfume strong enough to give me a headache. Evan was already sitting in the living room, wine glass in hand with Emma next to him. Still beautiful, smug, and carrying that judgmental stare like she was born with it. "Wow, Ivy, you look healthy," Emma smiled awkwardly. "Still surviving," I replied, smirking. We had dinner: overcooked roast beef, mashed potatoes, and red wine. The atmosphere was oddly light at first, like a bad play no one knew how to act in. They asked me about work, about my health, about the weather. I answered just enough. No more, no less. But then, what I'd been waiting for finally arrived. When the apple pie was served, my mom gently tapped her spoon against her wine glass, just like she always did when she had something important to say. "Ivy, actually, there's something your father and I wanted to discuss with you." I looked up. Evan leaned closer to the table. Emma adjusted her posture. The air turned noticeably colder. "Evan and Emma are planning their wedding, as you know, and they also want to renovate the house. Add a new living room, expand the backyard for outdoor parties." I kept my face blank, nodding like I was watching the evening news. "The thing is," Mom looked at me like she was begging, "the costs have really gone up and, well, the economy's been tough. So, we wanted to ask if you might be able to help out a little, pitch in. You know, as family." "How much exactly?" I asked, voice calm like I was talking to a client at work. Evan pulled a packet of papers from his pocket and slid it across the table. I opened it. The title read, "Home Expansion Estimate. $102,450. I looked up, my lips curling into a cold smile. $100,000? That's neat. You know how expensive construction is nowadays?" Evan chimed in. "And besides, it's an investment. The house value will skyrocket. And of course, we'll always be grateful." "I don't remember being a shareholder in your lives," I said, smiling. "Or even listed in the will for that matter." My mom froze. Her face lost color. But she quickly switched gears, falling back on her old tactic. "Ivy, you used to say family matters most. We're supposed to help each other when we can. You're doing great, we know that. You don't need much. But your brother, he's starting a family." "That's right, he's starting a family," I said slowly, clearly. "And he already got a house, a car, a fully paid college education. Meanwhile, your daughter got a scratch-off ticket and a good luck." Silence. Tense as a tightrope, my mother's eyes welled up. But I wasn't moved. And now that ticket seems to have hit it big, suddenly everyone remembers there's a daughter named Ivy. My dad cleared his throat, about to speak, but I raised a hand to stop him. "Don't. No need to explain. I know this game way too well." I stood up, folded the estimate, and placed it back on the table. "The answer is no. Not because I'm selfish, but because I once needed all of you, and no one was there." I looked each of them in the eye. "Now, I'll be here for myself." Emma looked away. Evan mumbled a curse. My mother burst into tears. But I felt nothing. Not sadness, not anger. Just relief. I walked out without looking back. In the car, my phone buzzed nonstop. A message from Mom. "Ivy, I'm sorry if we upset you, but family is forever. Won't you reconsider?" I locked the screen, flipped the phone face down on the passenger seat, and turned on the music. The speakers played. "Sometimes, walking away is the kindest thing you can do for yourself." I smiled. The game had begun, but this time, I wasn't playing by their rules anymore. I thought that dinner was the peak of it. But no, they weren't done yet. 2 days after the summons at my parents' house, I got another message from Mom. "Ivy, come by again this Sunday, okay? The whole family wants to share more plans about the wedding. I made your favorite almond cake." I laughed. A dry, drained laugh with no feeling left. They still thought they could reel me back in with a worn-out cake recipe from 1997 and sweet-talking invitations dipped in honey-laced sleeping pills. None of them realized I had changed. I was no longer the old Ivy, the quiet one, the agreeable one, always nodding to keep the peace in a twisted family. I didn't reply. That Sunday morning, I sat in the armchair by my window, holding a cup of hot coffee. Sunlight filtered through the trees, shining onto a warm patch of wooden floor. My phone vibrated non-stop. From Mom, from Evan, then Emma. The messages poured in like a fever. "Where are you? The whole family's waiting." "Ivy, not showing up is really rude." I set the phone down on the table and didn't touch it again. 3 days later, I received a package. Inside was a detailed plan for Evan's home renovation and wedding. Everything from interior design fees to flower vendor quotes. Along with it was a handwritten letter from Mom, the handwriting shaky. "Dear daughter, we just need a little help from you. Family is about sharing. I know you're doing well. Don't forget who raised you, who sacrificed for you to have what you have today. I've always loved you." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Then, I sat down and wrote a reply, not to send, but to free myself. "Dear Mom, I used to think that if I just tried harder, everything would be different. That, if I got better grades, behaved better, sacrificed more, you would finally see me. But I realized, some people will never want to see you. Even when you're standing right in front of them. You only saw Evan. Do you remember? Christmas when I was 8. I gave you a drawing I made with crayons. You put it behind the fridge. Evan gave you a store-bought card, and you framed it and hung it in the living room. Do you remember when Evan turned 16 and got a car, while I worked a part-time job to buy second-hand sneakers? When I asked why, you said, "You're a girl, you don't need a car." I didn't forget. Every word, every glance, every time you chose Evan. And then, on graduation day, Evan got a house. And me? A $2 scratch-off ticket. I laughed then, because if I hadn't, I would have screamed in the middle of that restaurant. But Mom, what hurt me the most wasn't the lack of gifts. It was the feeling that I had never really been part of this family. And now, when you and Dad know I have money, suddenly you remember me. Suddenly you need me. And that need costs $100,000? You said family is forever. But when I needed you, where were you? I'm not writing this to blame you. I'm writing so you'll understand. I'm no longer waiting. No longer hoping for recognition. No longer begging for scraps of affection. I've made my own way, and I don't owe anyone anything. Goodbye, Mom. I folded the letter and placed it into the fireplace. The paper curled, burned slowly, then turned to ash. I watched the thin trail of smoke rise, and it felt like part of the weight in my chest floated away with it. That same night I opened my phone, held down Mom's number, and tapped block contact. Then I did the same for Evan, Emma, and Dad. The last message from Mom before she was blocked read, "Ivy, how could you be so heartless? Family is the last thing you can count on. You'll regret this." I stared at the message for a while. Then I turned off the phone. Not a single tear. I didn't feel regret. I felt free. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and biked around the lake behind my house. The sky was pale blue, birds chirping, and the morning breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. I stopped at the shore and took a deep breath. No more threatening texts. No more guilt trips. No more indifferent stares or hearing my name forgotten at family parties. Just me. And the life I chose for myself. In my jacket pocket I carried an old coin, the very one I used to scratch that life-changing lottery ticket. I held it tightly in my hand, then let it drop into the lake. It hit the water, making a small ripple that spread outward. Just like me. Breaking away from the old cycle, starting a new motion, soft but certain. Not everyone is born into a perfect family. But everyone has the right to choose their boundaries. And I had made mine. After blocking all contact with my family, I thought I'd feel empty, that maybe some part of me would go back, knock on their door, ask for forgiveness, beg to be accepted. But no. I felt light. Strangely light. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to check my phone every morning in fear of guilt-tripping messages. No more midnight calls from Mom, her voice trembling as she asked, "Do you ever think about your family?" No more pretending to be happy at dinners I was never even invited to in the first place. I started living, truly. Carol, my financial advisor, helped me build a solid investment portfolio, real estate in Florida and Colorado, blue-chip stocks, and a few promising tech startups. Every month, the returns came in like a warm current, steady and clean. I didn't buy a luxury mansion or $1 million yacht, but I bought myself peace. I renovated my house in the suburbs of Concord, installed sliding glass doors to let in the morning light, laid oak floors, and built a small library with a reading chair right by the window. I hung a hammock in the backyard, where I could lie down in the late afternoon, read a book, or do nothing at all but listen to the wind rustling through the maple trees. I traveled. I went to Napa Valley during grape harvest season, tasting wine at a peaceful vineyard on a hillside. I flew to Charleston, South Carolina, slowing down for a few weeks along cobblestone streets and vintage cafes. I even learned to ski for the first time in Colorado, and fell flat like someone punched me in the knees. But, I laughed. Because I was allowed to fall. No one was watching me. No one demanded I stay strong for the family anymore. Meanwhile, Evan stayed the same. I heard bits and pieces from a few old friends in town that he was having financial trouble. My parents, of course, stepped in to help. Mom cashed out her savings account to pay off Emma's credit card debt. Dad sold his old pickup truck, the one he used to call the soul of a man, to put down a deposit for Evan's new house. It was strange. They were still spinning in that same cycle, the cycle that once dragged me under. But now, I stood outside of it, just watching, no longer pulled in. Until one day, I ran into Evan. By chance. I had just left a client meeting at an upscale cafe downtown when I saw him across the street, holding a paper bag from a discount drink store, his shirt wrinkled, his face a little worn out. I almost didn't recognize him. But he spotted me immediately. "Ivy." I paused, tilted my head slightly. "Evan." He crossed the street, forcing a crooked smile. "Wow, you look different. Beautiful. Successful. Like someone else." I smiled gently. "Yeah, time changes a lot." Evan glanced at my car, a silver Tesla parked neatly a few steps away. His eyes glinted with something between envy and contempt. "I heard you won the lottery," he asked, his voice strained, trying to sound casual but unable to hide the bitterness. I didn't answer, just shrugged. "Lucky you," he chuckled, but without joy. "Some of us work our asses off and still don't get what one scratch ticket gave you." I looked him straight in the eyes. For a long moment. "Yes. That ticket was luck," I said slowly. "But everything after that. The investments, the learning, the building, the silence, the discipline. That was me." Evan said nothing. My words hit him like a slap, wiping the fake smile off his face. I walked toward my car. "And hey," I turned back. My voice wasn't cold or harsh, just clear. "If I had given you that ticket back then, you would have burned it. Because you never had to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet." I opened the car door and got in. Evan stood there, gripping the paper bag like it was the last thing he had left in the world. I drove away. I didn't look back. That night, I lay on the hammock in my backyard, listening to the crickets and staring at the full moon. No one bothered me. No one demanded anything. Maybe I did win the lottery. But what I truly won was the right to own my life. I used to be a shadow. A daughter who didn't matter either way. Now, I am me. And that is worth more than any jackpot in the world? Every morning, waking up in the house I bought with my own money, I pour myself a cup of coffee, stand by the large window, and watch the sunlight slowly spill across the lawn. And I always ask myself one thing. I could have had this life sooner, if I had dared to choose myself from the beginning. But that's okay, because now, I've done it. Not because of luck from a lottery ticket, but because I dared to stop, dared to say no, dared to cut the invisible strings that tied me to a family that only knew how to manipulate and take. Money bought me peace, rest, and the travels I used to dream of during a childhood caged in by my parents' limits. But what changed me the most wasn't the number in my bank account. It was the right to choose. For the first time, I get to choose who I spend time with, where I live, what I do each day, without having to please anyone. I no longer resent my parents. No longer feel bitter toward Evan. I don't feel like I need to get revenge or prove anything anymore. Those feelings died along with the nights I waited for praise from my mother and only got a blank stare, or when I lay awake hearing Evan called the pride of the family, while I scrambled to pay my tuition on time. I used to think forgiveness was weakness, that it meant letting someone come back and hurt you all over again. But now I understand. Forgiveness is setting the weight down and moving forward. No need to carry it with you. I didn't reach out to them. No calls, no birthday wishes, no greetings on Christmas or Thanksgiving. But if someone asks, "How's your family these days?" I just smile and answer calmly. We each have our own path. And I'm walking mine. I don't need them to know how well I'm living. I don't need their admiration or their regret. I don't need anything from them anymore. I started spending time with people who truly deserved it. New friends, old coworkers who kept in touch, even when I had nothing. Now and then, I visit a nonprofit organization in Concord, where I support a scholarship fund for students without family support. Because I understand. They're living the pain I once carried. One day I was invited to speak at an orientation event for incoming students at a community college. They didn't know I was a millionaire. They only knew I was someone who started from the bottom, and didn't stop. I stood at the front of the auditorium, the light softly hitting my hair, and my voice was steady and clear. I'm not here to talk about success. I'm here to tell you this. If someone spends their whole life making you feel like you're never enough, like you're undeserving, that's not someone you need to keep around. Even if that person is family. The room went silent. I saw red eyes, clenched hands. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is draw a boundary. For yourself, and for others. I stepped down to a long round of applause. Not because I was eloquent, but because they knew I was telling the truth. They felt it. That night, I drove home, turned on my favorite jazz playlist and sat on the hammock in my backyard, eyes closed. No one texted "come home for dinner." No one called to ask for money. No one laced guilt into every word. Just the wind brushing past the porch. And the peace I had spent nearly my whole life trying to reach. I thought of Evan. Probably still living off Mom, driving the SUV Dad co-signed, swiping through Tinder at midnight to fill the void in a house built on promises that never quite paid off. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel hatred. I just didn't care anymore. Because when you finally escape the toxic grip of people who defined your worth by their own terms, you realize something crystal clear. Not everyone who shares your blood is meant to walk with you to the end of your journey. And sometimes, freedom isn't about how much money you have. It's about whether you're brave enough to stand up and walk away from what made you believe you were invisible. I used to be Ivy, the forgotten daughter. Now, I'm still Ivy. But I'm Ivy for myself. Not for them. Not anymore. Ivy's story is proof that not everyone born into the same family receives the same love or fairness. But instead of holding on to resentment or constantly seeking validation, she chose to let go, rise up, and build her life her way. Money may have helped her break free, but it was her growth, self-respect, and courage to sever toxic ties that marked her true victory. Real freedom begins when you choose yourself. What do you think about Ivy's choice? Would you do the same in her shoes? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel to keep discovering heartfelt family stories and life-changing lessons. I never thought I could feel this kind of pain. Not physical pain, not the sleepless nights from exhaustion, but the kind of pain that comes from being completely crushed by the person who matters most in your life. My phone vibrated, a message from Jenna. My cousin. You need to see this, I'm sorry. I frowned and tapped the link she sent. It was a live stream on social media, showing a familiar scene. The dining room at my mother's house. Everyone was gathered around the table, the clinking of silverware against porcelain plates, the sound of glasses toasting under the warm golden lights. But I wasn't there. I was over 200 miles away, staying at a hotel for a real estate conference I had planned for months. In the center of the frame, my mother leaned back in her chair, swirling a glass of wine in her hand. Her face lit up with amusement, as if she were about to tell a particularly funny joke. Oh, please, does she really think selling houses makes her successful? What a desperate, pathetic failure. A chill ran down my spine. Her voice was casual, but every word cut deep. She thinks real estate is some big dream? Let's see. A girl who wasn't smart enough for med school, now selling homes to people who actually made it? Laughter rippled through the table. My aunt chuckled. My uncle nodded along as if my mother had just shared an exceptionally witty punchline. Remember when she cried her eyes out over failing that nursing exam? My mother turned to Aunt Carol, her eyes glimmering as if she were recalling a fond memory. She came home sobbing like a 5-year-old, saying she couldn't do it. So pathetic. Laughter erupted again. They were laughing at my struggles. Laughing at the years I had spent carrying this family on my back. The livestream continued, but I couldn't hear anything anymore. My ears rang, my fingers tightened around my phone until my fingertips went numb. They didn't know, they knew nothing. Not a single one of them knew that last year, I had drained my savings to pay for my mother's treatment when her insurance refused. None of them knew that I had worked over 60 hours a week, running across the city selling houses just to cover the never-ending medical bills. None of them knew that I had taken her to every doctor's appointment, fought with insurance companies to get her better medication. I had given up my future to save her. And this was my reward? The screen blurred as tears fell onto my phone. I never thought I would witness this. A woman I loved, a woman I had sacrificed everything for, sitting there, ridiculing me in front of the whole family. My phone vibrated again. Jenna, do you want me to delete the video? I wiped my tears, my heart pounding against my ribs. No. I wanted it to stay. I needed to see the truth. I needed to remember this moment. The moment I realized that no matter how much I sacrificed, she would never appreciate me. I took a deep breath. Tomorrow, I was going back. And this time, I was done helping her. 5 years ago, my life was completely different. I still remember the day I got my acceptance letter to NYU's nursing program. I cried with joy. Not the weak kind of crying my mother always mocked, but the kind that came from pure pride. I had done it. Ever since I was a child, I had dreamed of becoming a nurse. Not just for the stability or the salary, but because I wanted to help people who needed me. I loved taking care of others, watching them heal, knowing I could make a difference. I thought my mother would be proud. She didn't say much when I showed her the letter. She just nodded and kept watching her favorite TV show. But I didn't let it bother me. I knew she wasn't great at showing emotions. Then, on a chilly autumn night, during my second year of college, one phone call changed everything. I was studying in the library when my phone vibrated. Mom. I picked up, and immediately, I heard crying. Lily. I don't know what to do, I'm in so much pain. I shot up from my seat. Where are you? I'm at home, I can't lift my arm, my knee is swollen. It hurts so bad I can't stand. I hurriedly gathered my books and rushed out of the library like a gust of wind. I grabbed a taxi home, my hands trembling the entire ride. When I arrived, my mother was curled up on the couch, her face pale with pain. "Mom, let me take you to the hospital." She weakly shook her head. "I don't have money, Lily. My insurance doesn't cover enough, and I've been calling them all week." My chest tightened. How could she endure this without telling me? I helped her into the car and sped to the nearest hospital. The doctors ran tests and took x-rays before delivering the diagnosis. Rheumatoid arthritis. "This is a lifelong condition," the doctor said in a low voice. "She will need continuous treatment, pain management, physical therapy, and possibly surgery in the future." I looked at my mother. She covered her face, sobbing, her entire body trembling. "I can't afford this," she mumbled. I held her hand tightly. "I'll take care of it, you don't have to worry about anything." I made a promise. And I kept it. As her condition worsened, I started missing classes to take her to doctor's appointments. I worked part-time at a coffee shop to make extra money, but it was never enough. Medical bills piled up on the kitchen table, with debt notices arriving every day. "Can you take a break from school for a while?" she asked one evening as we ate in silence. I froze. "What?" "Just for a little while, Lily, until things stabilize. You could get a better job, make more money, and go back to school later." I looked into her eyes. I wanted to scream, "Being a nurse is my dream!" But then I saw her hands, trembling as she held her spoon. Heard her labored breathing from the pain. And I couldn't. I nodded. And just like that, I gave up my dream. I enrolled in a real estate course because it was the fastest way to make enough money to support her. I told myself, just for a short time. Once she gets better, I'll go back to nursing. But a short time turned into a year, then 2, then 5. She never got better, and I never got the chance to go back. I thought she would be grateful. But I was wrong. At first, she would say thank you when I helped pay her bills. But that gratitude slowly faded. "Why are you always working?" she complained. "You're always busy, never home with me." "Lily, I need to see the doctor on Tuesday. You'll take me, right?" I told her I had an important client. She sighed. "It's always clients. Who is your real family, Lily?" I clenched my jaw. She never understood that I was doing all of this for her. Whenever she talked about me dropping out of nursing school, she never acknowledged my sacrifice. "It was just too hard for you, wasn't it?" she said once, as I handed her medicine. "Not everyone is cut out to be a nurse." I stood there, frozen. Not everyone is cut out for it? I had given up everything. I had abandoned my dream. I had let go of the life I once longed for. And she still thought I quit because I wasn't good enough? But I kept going. For her. Because I had made a promise. Until tonight. Until I saw her laughing at me in front of our whole family, calling me a desperate failure on a live stream. I stared at my phone screen, old wounds and fresh ones twisting together, suffocating me from the inside out. I had given up my entire life, for someone who never valued me. And now, I know one thing. I'm not doing this anymore. I sat in a cafe on Maple Street, my fingers tracing the edge of the thick folder in front of me. This was the proof of 5 years of my life being drained for someone who never appreciated me. Jenna walked in, her messy blue hair framing a face filled with concern. "Are you okay?" She pulled out a chair across from me, her voice softer than usual. I didn't answer right away. "Okay?" I had just watched my own mother mock me in front of the entire family. I had silently listened as they whispered, laughed along with her, ridiculed me. I had seen it all. And I still couldn't fully grasp the depth of this pain. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living like this. I slid the folder toward Jenna. "Look at this. This is everything I've done for her." Jenna raised an eyebrow and carefully opened it. I watched as her eyes scanned each page. Bank statements, medical bills, transaction receipts. $120,000. That money didn't come from an unlimited savings account. It came from grueling work hours, From sleepless nights negotiating with clients. From dreams I had put on hold. Jenna slowly looked up, her eyes burning with anger. "Oh my God! You paid for all of this? By yourself?" I nodded. And in return she called me a failure. Jenna's voice was sharp as a knife. I let out a small bitter laugh. "So I have no reason to keep doing this anymore." I unlocked my phone and logged into my bank account. With a single tap, every penny I had ever set aside for my mother was transferred into my tuition fund. "I'm going back to school," I said firmly. Jenna didn't say anything, but I saw the admiration in her eyes. And I wasn't stopping there. I opened my email and began typing. Subject: Financial responsibility. Dear family. After many years, I've decided that I will no longer be covering any of my mother's medical expenses. In the past 5 years, I have spent over $120,000 on her treatments, medications, and insurance. I have also taken her to every doctor's appointment, handled all her insurance paperwork, and fought with the insurance company to ensure she received the best possible care. In return, I was publicly called a failure. Attached is a detailed breakdown of the expenses I have covered throughout the years. If anyone truly cares about her, they are welcome to contribute instead of expecting me to carry this burden alone. As of today, I have no further obligations to her. Lily. I hit send. It's done. Jenna looked at me and smiled. Not a happy smile, but one of quiet understanding. "You don't owe her anything anymore," she said softly. I nodded. Not anymore. My phone started vibrating non-stop. I didn't bother reading my mother's messages. I knew exactly what she would say. I knew she would play the perfect victim, claiming I had abandoned her in her time of need. Messages from other relatives weren't much different. "Aunt Carol, your mother sacrificed her whole life for you. And this is how you repay her?" Uncle Greg. "Lily, what the hell are you doing? She's your mother. It's your responsibility to take care of her." Cousin Alex, all parents make mistakes, you can't just turn your back on her over a little hurt. I let out a bitter laugh. My responsibility? Funny how easy it is for them to say that. It's easy to judge, when they've never sacrificed a single cent. Never stayed up at night drowning in bills, never given up their dreams to be a lifeline for someone who never appreciated them. I opened my contact list. And then, one by one, I started blocking them. But not everyone was on my mother's side. A message popped up unexpectedly. "Aunt Bridget. Lily, you did the right thing. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. If you need anything, call me." I blinked, a surprising sense of relief spreading through my chest. Then, another message from Jenna. "I just left the family group chat. They're not worth my time. And neither are they worth yours." I had spent so much of my life trying to please someone who was never satisfied. But now I had let go. I didn't know how my mother would manage without me carrying the weight for her, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I had chosen my path, and I wasn't going to make the same mistake again. The doorbell rang, loud and persistent, as if the person outside wouldn't leave until I answered. I stood frozen in my living room, staring at the wooden door, my heart pounding against my ribs. I knew who it was. My mother. She had called me dozens of times over the past 2 days, leaving furious and resentful voicemails. I hadn't answered. Now, she was here, trying to force me to face her. "Lily, I know you're in there." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "Open the door right now." Her voice was sharp, tinged with desperation, but I didn't let myself waver. I had spent a decade doing everything the way she wanted. Now, for the first time in my life, I was choosing what was right for me. I didn't open the door. I stood still, waiting. After a while, the pounding grew weaker, then faded into the sound of unsteady footsteps, retreating. I thought that would be the end of it, but I had underestimated her persistence. 2 days later, I received a text from Aunt Morin. "Aunt Morin, Lily, your mother is at my house. She says you abandoned her. What is going on?" I sighed. Of course. She had found someone else to lean on. No one in my family knew my mother the way I did. She had a way of making herself the victim, making others feel responsible for helping her. She would talk about her illness, about being left behind by her daughter, about all the hardships she had to endure. I texted back, "Aunt Maureen, do you really think I would cut her off without a good reason?" Minutes later my phone rang. Aunt Maureen was calling. I answered. "Lily, I don't know what happened between you and your mother, but she's devastated. Who do you think paid every single one of her medical bills for the past 5 years?" I said slowly, keeping my voice calm. Silence. "Your mother said you're having some kind of mental breakdown, that you're overwhelmed by work and life and you just snapped and cut her off." I laughed, a cold, bitter laugh. "Do you want me to resend the email I sent to the entire family? It has all the proof of how I took care of her. If I have mental issues, it's because she drained me dry for all those years." Aunt Maureen was silent for a few seconds. I knew she was thinking. "I don't know who to believe, Lily," she said, her voice quieter now. "Then don't believe anyone, just look at the facts." I ended the call. I wasn't surprised when, a few days later, rumors about me started spreading through the family. "Aunt Carol, Lily is under extreme stress, maybe she needs help." Cousin Alex. "It's sad to see someone as kind as Lily turned so cold." Uncle Greg. "Does anyone know if Lily is on some kind of medication? She's not acting normal." My mother had turned me into the crazy one in their eyes. But this time, I didn't care. I turned off my notifications and focused on work, preparing for my upcoming nursing courses. In the mornings, I woke up early, exercised, and read nursing textbooks. I restructured my workload, prioritizing high-value clients instead of taking on every contract. I hired an assistant, something I never thought I could afford when I was funneling all my earnings into my mother's expenses. For the first time in years I felt free. No more worrying about my mother's medical bills. No more answering calls demanding that I drop everything for her. No more guilt for choosing to live my own life. Jenna stopped by one afternoon, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Is she still at Aunt Maureen's?" I asked. Jenna shrugged. "Still there, but I heard Aunt Maureen is starting to realize she's not as devastated as she pretends to be." I smiled. No one could hide their true nature forever. Jenna looked at me, curiosity in her eyes. "Do you regret it?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "No, I lost 5 years of my life because of her. If I hadn't stopped, I might have lost my entire life." Jenna let out a relieved smile. "Good, because for the first time in forever I see you actually living." I looked out the window, watching the sun set behind the buildings. A new day would come, and I would never let myself return to that darkness again. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. I stepped out of the classroom, my backpack heavy on my shoulders but my heart light. I was back in nursing school. After 5 years of putting my dreams on hold, I had finally returned. Not for anyone else. Not for some meaningless promise. But for me. The first few days weren't easy. I had to relearn medical concepts, adapt to changes in the curriculum, and still maintain my real estate work to stay financially stable. But this time, I wasn't running myself into the ground for someone else. I chose my clients carefully, focusing on high-value deals instead of taking every offer. I hired an assistant to handle administrative tasks, giving myself time to study. And then, something unexpected happened. "Lily, you've been nominated for the Resilience in Real Estate Award." I looked up from my laptop, staring at Jeffrey, my longtime colleague in the industry. "What?" I frowned, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "It's an award for people who have overcome adversity but remained strong in their careers. You're one of the top nominees." I froze. I had never expected recognition. I had worked tirelessly. No one had seen my sleepless nights, my silent struggles, the tears I shed under pressure. I hadn't done any of it for praise. I had done it because I needed to survive. And yet, now, what I had done was finally being recognized. A few weeks later, I walked into the hall where the award ceremony was being held. I wore a navy blue dress, simple yet elegant, the first thing I had bought for myself in years. And the winner of this year's Resilience in Real Estate Award is Lily Carter. Applause erupted throughout the room, but I felt frozen in my seat. Jeffrey nudged me gently. Go accept your award, Lily, you deserve it. Slowly, I stepped onto the stage. As my fingers wrapped around the crystal trophy, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride in myself. I was no longer the woman who lived for others' expectations. I was no longer trapped in the role of the daughter who had to sacrifice everything. I had stood up and taken control of my own life. But at that moment, my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. Jenna. Stepping off the stage, I moved to a quiet hallway and answered. Jenna? What's going on? Her voice was tense. Lily, your mother is in the hospital. I didn't feel shock. I didn't feel panic. I only felt a familiar exhaustion, as if the universe was testing my resolve. What happened? My voice was calmer than I expected. A reaction to her medication. She fell and was taken to the ER. Jenna hesitated for a second before adding, Aunt Maureen called me. She said, your mom wants to see you. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I owed her nothing. I had cut her off financially, set my boundaries. But I was the only one who could provide her medical history. I exhaled slowly. All right, send me the hospital address. When I entered the hospital room, my mother was sitting upright in bed. Her face was gaunt, but her eyes still held that familiar glint of control. Aunt Maureen stood beside her, looking uncomfortable. Lily, your mother. I held up my hand, signaling that I would handle this myself. My mother stared at me. So, you finally decided to come. No thank you, no appreciation. Just the same familiar entitlement. I pulled up a chair and sat down, keeping my voice steady. I'm here to provide your medical information to the doctors, nothing more. She smirked. Are you trying to hurt me, Lily? I let out a quiet, bitter laugh. No, Mom, you already did that yourself. Her eyes flickered, as if she hadn't expected me to say it so directly. Aunt Maureen cleared her throat, clearly uneasy with the conversation. I turned to her. Do you know what she said about me behind my back? Aunt Maureen blinked, glancing at my mother. Lily, what are you talking about? Jenna recorded it, the whole family heard it. For the first time, I saw real hesitation on my mother's face. Aunt Maureen stared at her. Patricia, is there something I don't know? I stood up. I did everything for you, and you repaid me by calling me a failure. But as you can see, I didn't fail. I went back to school, I won an award, I rebuilt my life without you. She had no words. Aunt Maureen looked at her, doubt filling her eyes. I reached down for my bag. I've fulfilled my responsibility, now it's time for you to take care of yourself. Without giving her a chance to argue, I turned and walked out of the room. This time, I wasn't running away. I walked out stronger than ever. I stepped out of the hospital after my night shift, the crisp autumn breeze brushing against my face, bringing a sense of peace I had never felt before. 3 months ago, I had officially re-enrolled in nursing school, continuing the path I had once abandoned. This time, not for anyone else, but for myself. I was still working in real estate, but only taking on a select few clients to maintain financial stability. No more sleepless nights worrying about my mother's bills. No more invisible weight of obligation pressing down on me every single day. Now, every decision I made was for myself. One late afternoon, I received an email from the Boston Medical Journal, a well-known regional medical publication. We would love to write about your journey, from real estate agent to pursuing your dream of becoming a nurse. Would you be open to sharing your story? I stared at the screen, a strange feeling swelling in my chest. I had never thought my story was worth telling. I had spent years trapped in a cycle of serving others, sacrificing everything without being appreciated. But now I understood. Reclaiming my life was a journey worth sharing. I agreed to the interview. A week later, I sat in a small cafe with a journalist from the magazine, recounting everything I had been through. Why did you decide to leave real estate and return to nursing? She asked, curiosity in her voice. I smiled slightly and took a sip of coffee. Because I realized I had been living someone else's life for too long. She tilted her head, waiting for me to continue. I used to believe that if I did enough, sacrificed enough, my mother would appreciate me. But that never happened. What made you change? I glanced out the window, watching people hurry through their own lives. One day I realized I didn't need her approval to be happy. And that was the moment I decided to take my life back. The journalist nodded, jotting down notes quickly. The interview ended, but I knew my story wasn't over. The article was published a week later. I didn't think too much about it. I was busy with school, work, and all the new possibilities unfolding before me. But one evening, my phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Lily, it's Uncle Patrick." I blinked in surprise. Uncle Patrick rarely called me. "Hi, Uncle, what's going on?" He cleared his throat, sounding uncomfortable. "Your mother read the article about you." I fell silent, my heartbeat slowing. I didn't know what I was expecting. An apology? Acknowledgement? "What did she say?" I asked, my voice calmer than I had expected. "She didn't say much. Just that I think she finally realizes that you actually made it." I let out a small, bitter laugh. "Do you think she's proud of me?" Uncle Patrick sighed. "She'll never admit it, you know that. But when I saw her eyes while she was reading the article, I think that, for the first time in her life, she knew you were no longer the little girl she could control." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I had once craved my mother's recognition. I had waited for a thank you, for her to say she understood what I had done. But now, I didn't need it anymore. "Thank you for calling, Uncle. Are you okay?" I opened my eyes, looking around my small apartment, the place I had built for myself, free from anyone's control. I was no longer the girl who lived for someone else's approval. I was okay. I've never felt better. I hung up and set my phone down on the table. That night, I sat on my couch, a medical textbook open on my lap, but I didn't rush to read. I looked around the room, the warm glow of the lamp casting soft light, everything neat and peaceful. No more pressure. No more guilt. No one controlling my life anymore. I knew my mother wouldn't change. I knew she would continue playing the victim, never admitting she was wrong. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I didn't need her recognition to know my worth. I didn't need an apology to validate that I had done the right thing. I had found my own life, and I would never lose it again. Flipping to the next page, I smiled. I was truly living for myself. Lily's story is not just about breaking free from a toxic relationship, but also a profound lesson on self-worth and the right to live for oneself. In life, many people sacrifice everything for their family, but that sacrifice is not always appreciated. Lily realized that no one is obligated to give up their future for someone who does not cherish them. She bravely cut ties, reclaimed her life, and found true happiness. This is a powerful reminder that setting boundaries is not selfish, it is self-respect. What do you think about Lily's journey? Have you ever found yourself sacrificing for family without appreciation? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more real-life stories about family and life. The phone buzzed in short, sharp bursts, leaping across the wooden table like it had a soul of its own. Mom called, then Dad, then Liam, my older brother, again and again. Each vibration felt like a slap from a past I thought I'd buried. 6 months had passed since I walked out of the house I grew up in. Kicked out without hesitation. Yet they still wouldn't let go. I didn't pick up. Didn't check the messages. Didn't care. I just sat still, back against the old leather chair I'd bought at a garage sale. Eyes fixed on the screen, shaking like it might explode if I ignored it long enough. My one-bedroom apartment in East Columbus wasn't fancy, but at least no one here called me a burden. I once believed they meant it when Mom screamed in the living room. "Get out, Piper, and don't you ever come back!" I didn't shout back. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. I just grabbed the duffel bag I'd packed in my mind for years and walked out, without a single glance behind me. I thought that was the end of it. But staring at those missed calls now, I knew. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because they'd lost control. I'm Piper McConnell, 30 years old, a data analyst for an insurance firm in Ohio. I used to be the model daughter. Never skipped class, never smoked, never stirred trouble. My brother Liam, on the other hand, was the family disaster magnet. He was coddled, like every mistake he made was the world's fault, never his own. They worshipped him like he was some fallen savior of our lineage. And me, the only one who paid off her student loans, bought her own car and helped cover the home insurance for 3 years, I was simply the one who should know better. I used to hold the whole family together. The one who ran out to get mom's meds, paid dad's overdue property taxes, and settled the internet bill Liam ignored for 2 months. I was the good one. The kind of good that leaves you drained, yet still labeled ungrateful when you say no for the 38th time. Now, each missed call on my screen makes me smirk. Cold, not cruel. Not because I take pleasure in ignoring them, but because I finally get it. I've escaped. I'm no longer the puppet whose strings are guilt. They don't own me anymore. But silence never lasts forever. Even after blocking Mom on Facebook, muting Liam's updates, and changing my number twice since February, they still found ways to reach me. As if I were a walking bank account. As if family love only held value as long as I could keep paying the bills. If you're reading this, you might ask, how does a well-behaved daughter, who always did everything right, end up cutting off her own parents and vanishing like a ghost? The answer didn't come from one explosive fight. It didn't start with some big betrayal. It began with the small things no one notices. The disappointed glances when I declined to send more money to my brother. The constant sour reminders that family means sacrifice. I didn't leave out of anger. I left because I was depleted. And for the first time in years, I could sit in my own apartment, let the phone ring endlessly, and feel nothing but peace. No one calls to ask what I've eaten, how I'm sleeping, or if I'm happy. All they want is to keep draining me like an endless resource. I don't remember exactly when I began to understand that love in my family came with conditions. Maybe it was when I was 8, proudly showing Mom my perfect test score, and she simply said, "Good, that's what you're supposed to do," before turning to comfort Cooper, my older brother, for getting a C in science. Every time I succeeded, it was treated like an expectation. Every time Cooper failed, he was coddled like a victim of an unfair world. Cooper is 4 years older than me, and even in elementary school he was treated like some tragic little prince. When he broke the living room lamp playing ball indoors, Dad just chuckled and said, "Boys will be boys." But when I spilled orange juice on the dining room rug, Mom sighed and said, "Piper, you're supposed to set an example for your brother." Brother? Cooper was 16. I grew up surrounded by expectations and silent obligations. Never said aloud, but always there. "Piper, you're the most reliable one. Piper, you're more mature than your brother. Piper, help Mom with this. Cooper's had a long day." As if I existed to patch up his endless messes. At 15, I got a part-time job at the local bookstore. Not for pocket money, but because I overheard Mom crying to Dad about the electric bill. I used my first paycheck to buy 2 bags of rice and a carton of milk. Left it in the kitchen without a word. The next day, Mom hugged me tight and called me her golden girl. 3 weeks later, Cooper asked for a new phone, and Mom secretly took out a personal loan to get him the latest iPhone. I wasn't mentioned again. For college, I was the only one in the family with a stable job. I worked at an insurance firm in downtown Columbus, lived in a tiny rental apartment, and sent money home every month. Sometimes labeled as helping your parents, other times as supporting Cooper while he figures things out. But Cooper never figured anything out. After dropping out of business school in his second year, he worked as a car dealership assistant, then quit because his boss was toxic. He'd tried launching a sports gear startup, which folded in 6 months. Now he's a freelance crypto trader, which meant sitting in his room all day blaming the market for his poor choices. I paid Mom's car insurance for 2 years. I funded roof repairs after a spring storm. I quietly covered over half the mortgage on a house they never acknowledged me having any claim to. But if I missed a transfer by a single day, Mom's voice would tremble on the phone. "Piper, I hate to say this, but I'm really disappointed." And Dad? He'd just text, "You need to think of others, not just yourself." I called it emotional blackmail. Guilt-flavored manipulation, the only language they truly spoke fluently. One day, I asked Mom outright, "Why does everyone act like it's my responsibility to take care of the whole family?" She paused, then replied, "Because you can, you're the only hope this family has." I swallowed the next question, but it screamed inside me. And what is Cooper, a backup plan or a bottomless pit? I once told Cooper I was saving up to buy my first condo. He laughed. "Why bother? This house will be yours anyway. Mom said so." I didn't reply. Because deep down, I knew, when it came down to it, that house would be handed over to the one who needed it more. Meaning, him. I'm not cold-hearted. I loved them. Fiercely, foolishly. But love in my family was like an interest-free loan that no one ever intended to repay. They didn't ask if I was okay after grueling work weeks. They didn't remember my birthday unless I reminded them. But they always remembered when the power bill was due. I didn't realize how drained I was until I opened my banking app one night and saw I had just enough left for a single pizza. And I wasn't even hungry. Just empty. So empty I couldn't even feel angry anymore. I'm not the ungrateful daughter they say I am. I'm just someone who reached her limit, and that limit was crossed the moment I realized the people I hoped would love me unconditionally only loved me as long as I could keep paying. It was a gloomy Saturday afternoon at the end of December. A fine drizzle hung in the air and the cold bit into my fingertips, even though they were buried deep in my coat pockets. I had just left the office after working 72 hours that week, not counting 2 overnight shifts for an end-of-quarter financial project. I was so exhausted, I couldn't even smell the coffee in my hand or hear the traffic behind the gas station. Still, out of muscle memory more than anything else, I turned into the grocery store and filled 2 bags with groceries, headed straight for the old house. Mom used to remind me, "Don't buy beef, get chicken. Cooper eats that better." I remembered. I also remembered her favorite brand of whole wheat bread, that Dad couldn't eat cheese, and that Cooper needed fresh orange juice every morning to keep his mind balanced. Every item in those bags reflected routines that never once included me. I locked the front door. The house looked the same except somehow more cluttered. Dad sat sunken into the worn, gray leather recliner, eyes glued to a basketball game on TV. Cooper sprawled across the sofa, hair messy, controller in hand, not even glancing my way. Mom stepped out of the kitchen, arms crossed, no greeting, just a sharp line. "Piper, we need to talk." I set the bags on the table and unwrapped my scarf. "About what?" I asked, though something in my chest already knew. Dad turned off the TV. The air suddenly thickened. Mom got straight to it. "You live on your own, have a steady salary, and meanwhile we're scraping by. Honestly, you should be contributing more. Not just food. Cash." I stood still. The room seemed to tilt. "I've been paying the car insurance, utilities and mortgage for 2 years, I said, voice calm but cold. "Not to mention groceries, plumbing repairs, and Mom's sleeping pills last month." Cooper looked up like I was a stranger. "You did that because you wanted to. No one made you." Then turned back to his screen, clicking buttons. I turned to Mom. "You really think I haven't done enough?" She snapped, voice rising. "We're family. Families help each other. Or do you think a few dollars make you queen of this house?" Dad added, with his usual monotone. If you were responsible, you wouldn't have left us to live alone in some luxury apartment. I let out a dry laugh that echoed through the smoke-tinged, musty room. That luxury apartment is 600 square feet, cracked walls and windows that don't block sound. It's the only thing I own after paying off everything for this house. Mom's voice dropped to ice. If you walk out that door today, don't bother coming back. It didn't surprise me. Maybe because I'd heard it before, through looks, through silence, through every panicked call demanding emergency transfers. But this time, she said it out loud. Plain. Fine. I looked around. The walls I'd painted, the lights I'd installed, the rug I'd bought on a 4-month payment plan. But none of it ever belonged to me. I took a deep breath. All right, I said. Steady. Almost surprising myself. I picked up my coat, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked to the door while Cooper kept gaming, and Dad turned back to the remote. I didn't look back. Not out of anger, but because I had already seen enough. As the door closed behind me, no one called out. No footsteps followed. Just the sharp cold hitting my face. Stinging, but clarifying. I stepped off the porch, my legs steady, my hands free. I walked straight ahead, leaving everything behind. The groceries, the money. And all those years I thought love could fix imbalance. I didn't know exactly how long it took before I stopped flinching at the sound of a text notification, or holding my breath every time my phone buzzed in the middle of the night. Maybe 2 weeks? Maybe 2 months. But one morning, sometime in mid-May, I woke up, pulled back the curtains, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat quietly watching the sunlight fall across my wooden kitchen counter, without feeling that familiar tightness in my throat. There were no bills in my name that weren't mine, no rushed messages from Mom asking, "Can you send it early?" No emails from Dad with the subject line, "Urgent, the bank called again." My apartment was small and old, but every part of it belonged to me. The chestnut-colored wool rug, the knife set I picked out one by one, the tiny cactus on the windowsill that had somehow survived even though I hadn't watered it in weeks. The quiet nights weren't interrupted by knocks asking for money. My weekends belonged to me again, spent at the farmer's market, at an old corner cafe, or just sleeping and guilt-free until noon. I began to feel time again, not measured in monthly transfers to my family. I read books, not work reports. I cooked, not to please anyone else, but to nourish myself. I even tried baking, though my old oven only had 2 settings: reheat and scorch. I started therapy, not because I thought I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why I'd ever believed that self-sacrifice was a requirement. My therapist, Janet, a silver-haired woman with a gaze as steady as it was kind, never told me I was right. She didn't say they were wrong either. She simply asked, "Piper, if someone treated your daughter like that, what would you say?" I couldn't answer right away, but I cried, for a long time. 6 months after I walked out, my phone rang again, a message from Dad. Just one sentence. "Piper, why haven't you sent this month's payment?" I read it 10 times. I wasn't shocked, just empty. Like someone had hurled a stone into the still pond I'd tried so hard to keep calm these past months. 5 minutes later came a call from Mom. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Are you mad at us? Why are you letting the house go into default? The bank already called. Do you want your family out on the street?" I stood silently in the kitchen, staring at the cactus on my windowsill. It was still alive. So was I. Not long after, Cooper sent a voice memo, exactly 18 seconds long. "You're unbelievable. Just tossing away your responsibility like trash. Go ahead, pretend we never existed." I didn't respond. I didn't feel the need to explain. I was no longer an open faucet of support. That alone made me the villain in their eyes. They must have thought I'd come back. that my silence was just some long, dramatic sulk, that eventually, I'd resume the steady stream of money like nothing had changed. What they didn't realize was that I hadn't just walked out of that house. I'd stepped out of a 30-year cycle they built and expected me to repeat forever. I carried my phone into the bedroom and set it down beside my laptop. A thought swept through my mind like a warm breeze. Did they really believe I'd always be the girl who nodded yes to every ridiculous request? I opened my banking app and reviewed my transaction history. The last transfer I made was in January, exactly 4 weeks before Mom told me to disappear. Nothing after that. But something odd stood out. I was still receiving emails from the mortgage lender, even though I no longer had any involvement. I decided to call the bank. The representative was polite and clear. "I'm sorry, Ms. McConnell. According to our records, the account has been delinquent for 8 months. The last full payment was in September of last year." A chill ran down my spine. I had sent money through January, but they hadn't used it to pay the mortgage. So where had it gone? I hung up the call. My mind pulsed with one single, pounding question. What else had they been hiding from me all this time? I held the phone in my hand, heart beating slow but heavy. 8 months. They hadn't paid the mortgage for 8 whole months. Even while I kept transferring money like a machine on autopilot. I didn't want to believe it, that I'd been deceived. Not once, but repeatedly, deliberately. But I wasn't naive anymore. I called Cooper first. He picked up on the first ring, voice groggy. "What's up, Piper?" "Did you know Mom and Dad haven't paid the mortgage in 8 months?" I asked directly. He hesitated. "Huh? What are you talking about?" 8 months. I emphasized each word. Even while I was still sending money, the bank confirmed there hasn't been a full payment since last September. Silence. Then an awkward chuckle. "You called just to throw accusations like that?" "I don't handle the money. But you live there. You didn't see the past due notices, the red stamped envelopes piling up on the kitchen table?" "I don't pay attention to that stuff," he said defensively. "Mom and Dad said they had it under control, and anyway, you're the one with money, right?" I lowered my hand, gripping the phone like it was the only thing anchoring me from falling into a void. That one sentence, "You're the one with money," was exactly why they'd treated me like a walking ATM for years. I called Mom. She picked up after the third ring. "Piper." Her voice cracked with emotion. "You called back, thank God. Why didn't you use the money I sent to pay the mortgage?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries. She paused. Then, like an actress on stage, her voice swelled with emotion. "You don't understand. Your father's back went out. Then the car broke down. We had to fix the plumbing. And Cooper lost a job contract." "What did you spend the money on?" I cut in. "We used it to stay afloat, Piper. We needed it for essential things." I clenched my jaw. "More essential than keeping the house from foreclosure?" She started to cry. "You have no idea how hard we've tried. You live alone. You don't know what it's like to carry an entire family through hard times." I laughed dryly. "No idea? Who's been paying the utilities, the insurance, your medications? Who bailed Cooper out of that loan he forgot about? Who's been working 10-hour days, only to be told I'm selfish for moving out?" I could hear Dad's voice in the background. "Piper, don't be cruel. We're your family. We need you." I took a deep breath. "And family means hiding a foreclosure while still draining my bank account behind my back?" Oh, response. "You could have been honest. You could have asked for help directly. But instead you chose to lie." Mom tried to steady her voice. "We didn't mean to, things just spiraled. And now it's really bad." "No, Mom. Things spiraled because you chose secrecy, chose silence, chose to let me keep paying for something no one else was trying to save." Dad stepped in, voice lower. more measured. Piper, we don't have much time. The bank issued a final notice. If you could help, just this once. We promise we'll be transparent. We'll change. I closed my eyes, brain spinning. They still didn't get it. To them, it was never about trust. It was about whether I'd keep paying. I opened my eyes. I'm not sending another dime. Silence. Mom sobbed. Dad exhaled slowly. I've helped as much as I could, I said. Now it's time for you to face the consequences of your own choices. I ended the call. A message from Cooper popped up seconds later. Nice job, Mom's crying so hard she can't breathe. Hope you're proud. I didn't reply. I set the phone down and stared at the blank screen. There was no anger left in me. No pity. Just one thing. Clarity. I wasn't going to carry other people's consequences anymore, and to them that was the ultimate betrayal. But for me, it was the first time I chose to stand on my own side. I opened the group chat. An old thread Mom had created for daily family updates, which in reality was just a list of grocery requests and vague reminders to send money. It was titled, McConnell Family. A heart-shaped symbol of affection that never quite matched the reality I lived. I set the phone down on the table and looked out the window. Light rain tapped against the glass, trails of water carving paths like roads back into memories. But this time, I didn't follow them. I didn't waver. I no longer confused love with obligation. I placed my hands on the keyboard and began typing. I'm no one's rescue plan anymore. I'm your daughter, not a talking ATM. For years I paid in time, energy and money, only to receive deceit, entitlement and blame in return. I paused for a moment, then continued. You don't need to ask what I've done for this family. You should ask what you did to deserve that trust. I forgave you many times. But forgiveness doesn't mean permission for repetition. And I no longer have room for hurt. I stared at the words on the screen. Concise, unmistakable, cold enough to avoid confusion, but still humane enough to not be cruel. I added one last line. From now on, every bill, every responsibility, every consequence, you'll handle on your own. I'm walking away from a role I never agreed to play. I hit send. Not in haste, not with hesitation. The screen flashed, delivered. 30 seconds later, a reply from Mom appeared. You're so cruel, Piper. I didn't raise you like this. I didn't respond. 10 seconds after that, a message from Dad. You'll regret turning your back on family. Still, I didn't respond. Finally, Cooper. Exactly the way I expected. You've got no conscience. Just wait. When you need us, we won't be there. I set the phone down, let out the longest breath I'd taken in months. My heart didn't shatter. It actually felt lighter. I opened my settings and went down the list, one by one. Mom, blocked. Dad, blocked. Cooper, blocked. Just 3 taps. 3 confirmations, and an eerie quiet followed. No buzzing phone at midnight, no angry voicemails, no pleading messages laced with manipulation. I didn't expect this peace to feel so still. It wasn't radiant like victory. It wasn't sweet like forgiveness. It was more like finally unfastening a leash from my neck. The invisible one I'd worn since childhood, labeled duty. That night I turned off the lights early. No wine, no music, no celebration. I simply pulled the blanket to my shoulders and drifted into the deepest, dreamless sleep I'd had in years. The next morning I checked my phone. Only silence. No demands, no one trying to make me feel guilty for living on my own terms. I ate breakfast alone, made coffee alone, and for the first time, I didn't feel lonely. I felt complete. As I left my apartment for work, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. That face, the one that used to carry the weight of a whole family, looked different. No more constant fatigue, no more fear in my eyes whenever Mom's name flashed on my screen. In its place was a steady gaze, calm, a little cold, but unmistakably mine. I knew they'd rewrite the story their own way. Piper. The ungrateful one who got rich and forgot where she came from. Piper. The heartless sister who abandoned her brother. Piper. The daughter who left her parents in ruin. They would talk. And I would stay silent, not because I couldn't defend myself, but because I didn't have to. I spent my entire youth trying to be good in their eyes. Now, I choose to be right in my own. The days after I blocked all three of them passed slowly, as if the universe itself was giving me time to breathe. No more unexpected calls, no more voices switching between pleading and guilt-tripping. No more flashes of memory that made me feel like I owed someone something just for existing. I went to work, came home, ate proper meals, slept deeply and without dreams. Simple things I used to sacrifice just to keep others comfortable. But that peace wasn't flawless. On quiet windless evenings, sitting on the couch with a cup of hot tea and soft jazz playing in the background, I'd sometimes wonder, was I too harsh? Did I truly abandon people who once shared my blood? I didn't have the answer. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't regretful either. Just quietly hollow. A still, silent kind of emptiness that lingered like a shadow in the corner of my eye. I remembered once, back in high school, I had a fever so high I couldn't stand. Mom handed me a Tylenol and said, "You better get well. I can't afford to miss work just because you're sick." I didn't feel hurt then. I felt like a burden. But now, looking back, I realize I was taught, early on, that my needs came last. And I carried that belief into adulthood. Right up to the day she screamed that I was ungrateful. Maybe the deepest wound wasn't the lies or the demands. Maybe it was that I ever believed all of it was normal. That love meant staying quiet. That sacrifice was a duty. That I was only worth keeping if I still brought value to the table. But real love doesn't work that way. It doesn't track what you give. It doesn't require proof of loyalty through pain. It took me 30 years to understand that. And once I did, I couldn't go back to being who I was. One Saturday afternoon, I drove out to the suburbs. I stopped at Glen Echo Park, a place I used to walk during college. The early summer sky was bright and clear. A breeze stirred the tall oak trees. I sat on an old wooden bench under one of them, watching kids ride their bikes and listening to their laughter ripple through the sunlight. I pulled out my phone, not to call anyone, just to open an old note. It was where I used to log every expense I covered for my family. I scrolled through line after line. Electricity, $160. Mom's medication, $78. Roof repair, $540. The list went on for 4 years. Each entry was a piece of my life I'd postponed. Each one a moment I'd convinced myself that giving more might finally make them love me better. I hit delete. Not to erase the past, but to stop letting it define who I was. When I got back to my car, the late-day sun cast a golden shimmer across the windshield. I sat there, hands on the wheel, feeling weightless. I knew I might run into them again someday, at a grocery store, a funeral, maybe through a message from a distant cousin. I didn't know how I'd feel then. But I did know one thing. Whatever emotion came, I wouldn't lose myself again. That night, lying in bed, I thought one clear thought. I don't regret walking away. I only regret not doing it sooner. Before I gave away too many pieces of myself. Before I believed that love meant depletion. Before I let them define my worth through monthly transfers and unspoken expectations. Now I choose to live differently. I'm not richer. I'm not more famous. But I'm free. And to me, that freedom is the most luxurious thing my younger self never dared to dream of. I placed my hand over my chest, where my heart still beat steadily, not from fear, not from pressure, just simply because I was alive. Fully and finally. I don't know what the next chapter of my life will hold. But I do know this. It will be written by me. No edits from others. No footnote saying, "For the family." No more supporting roles, to help someone else shine. Just me. Piper McConnell, 30 years old. And finally, I have reclaimed the sound of my own voice. Piper's story is a powerful reminder that love should never come at the cost of blind sacrifice. When family ties become financial and emotional burdens, boundaries aren't cruel, they're necessary. Piper didn't walk away out of selfishness, but out of the courage to finally live as her true self. Not as a walking wallet, not as a fixer of everyone's mess. Her freedom wasn't an escape, it was a release from a toxic cycle and the start of a life on her own terms. What do you think of Piper's decision? Was she too harsh, or did she finally claim the freedom she truly deserved? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more honest, heartfelt stories about family and self-discovery. I used to think family pranks only went as far as hiding the TV remote or changing the Wi-Fi password. But in that damned summer when I was 21, I realized some jokes are so cruel they rip trust apart and push you out of your own bloodline forever. That wasn't a joke anymore. It was a way of telling me I had never been welcome. And the scariest part? I had lived with those people my whole life. Calling them family now feels like a sick joke. If you think I'm exaggerating, let me tell you how it all started. My name is Harper. I was 21 that year, living in Idaho, in a tiny, stuffy old suburban house my dad called the family nest. There was nothing warm about it, except for the times my face burned with rage. I didn't go to college, not because I didn't want to, but because college is for dreamers with no grip on reality, my dad Carl's exact words. According to him, if I could count money, work with my hands, and not be dramatic, then that was good enough to get by. And just like that, good enough, I worked nearly full-time at his hardware store. Opened the warehouse in the morning, did inventory in the afternoon, closed the books and cleaned at night like a machine. No fixed salary. My dad gave me a few $100 a month and called it spending money. Even though I was the only one working full-time there besides him, my brother Kevin, the golden child, would occasionally swing by the shop, tease me, whistle 3 notes, then vanish like just showing up with some kind of contribution. Kevin was 2 years older than me, tall, smooth-talking, and seen by my dad as the perfect replica of himself. Every time Kevin said something pointless, my dad would laugh like it was the joke of the century. Me? Every time I tried to speak up, he'd frown and say, "You should learn to be quiet so you don't bother people." Some days it felt like I was living in a reality TV show, where I was the background character set up to make the 2 stars, my dad and Kevin, shine brighter. My mom Susan was the type who always wanted to keep the peace. She'd say, "Don't talk back to your father, you know how easily he gets mad." She was the only one in the house who was ever gentle with me, but that gentleness never turned into actual support. She never stood up for me, never stopped my dad from yelling at me like I wasn't his daughter but some stranger who owed him money. I remember clearly one time I came home late after walking nearly 5 miles from work. My only bike had been borrowed and broken by Kevin, left who knows where. I walked in, drenched in sweat, feet blistered, and the first thing I heard wasn't, "Are you okay?" It was my dad yelling from the living room. "I thought you were dead, on the side of the road, useless bitch." Kevin just snorted, snapped his fingers at me and said, "Hey Harper. Want me to show you the way to the dog shelter? Might suit you better." I was used to comments like that from them, so used to it that sometimes I wondered if I really was that awful. Maybe I did something wrong just by being born? But even when you're used to it, it still hurts. Hurts in a way that carves at your self-worth a little more every day, until you no longer believe you matter. That summer, I wasn't expecting anything. I was just surviving the days, telling myself things would be okay, as long as I kept my head down, endured, didn't fight back. I didn't know that the okay I was waiting for would come as the final blow. The push that threw me out of the only place I had ever called home. But to get to that part, I have to start where the nightmare put on the mask of a family vacation. It started with a short announcement from my dad. Next week we're going to Colorado for Uncle Jerry's wedding. No objections. Period. No one asked if I was free, if I wanted to go, if anyone noticed I was working nearly 50 hours a week at his store. My opinion was always the last thing considered. Or really, never considered at all. I remember when I was little I used to get excited whenever we left town. But with my family, no trip was ever a true vacation. It was just a traveling stage where they could keep up their usual act. I was the joke, and they were the cheering crowd. This trip was no different. Kevin drove the family's old SUV like he was in some expensive road show. I got crammed in the far back seat, next to a pile of luggage and a foam cooler leaking sandwich sauce all over. The whole ride from Idaho to Colorado, they took turns telling stories. Mostly about all the times I was useless, clumsy, a screw-up. Like my whole life was just a string of punchlines for their entertainment. My mom, as always, sat in the front seat, silent. Every now and then she'd force a weak smile, glance back at me, then look away. Her eyes said it all. I can't help you. 3 suffocating days. Kevin blasting wild rock music, my dad cursing every time he smelled fast food, and me, learning to hold my breath longer whenever the air thickened with tension. On the morning of the 4th day, we stopped at a tiny roadside rest area near Glenwood Springs. The place looked like it was dropped in the middle of nowhere, just a tiny building with a restroom and a couple of rusty vending machines, surrounded by snow-capped mountains and dry land stretching to the horizon. I said, "I need to use the bathroom." My dad replied without turning his head, "Make it quick. You're not some queen who gets special treatment." I stepped out of the car, wearing nothing but an old t-shirt and faded jeans. My wallet was somewhere in the luggage. Phone, charging in the car. The only charger had been hogged by Kevin all morning. I was gone maybe 8-9 minutes, but when I stepped back out, my eyes still adjusting to the harsh sunlight, I froze. The parking lot was empty. The silver-gray SUV, the car I had been attached to for more than half my life, vanished, as if it had never existed. At first I thought they had just parked somewhere nearby, playing some stupid hide-and-seek game like when I was 12. I wandered around the restroom building, peeked behind some low bushes, even called out softly, "Dad? Kevin? Mom?" No answer. No car that looked like ours. No sign they'd ever been here. Just the wind and the vending machine clanking like it was mocking me. Part of me wanted to believe it was a joke, but another part, the one worn down by 1,000 insults, rejections, and forgettings, started to ache, cold in my chest. I sat down on the scorching cement. My forehead was sweaty, but my back felt ice cold. An hour passed. I watched cars come and go. Everyone had somewhere to be. I had no one. A truck driver pulled over and looked at me with concern. "You okay, miss?" I forced a smile as thin as paper. "My friends. In the restroom. I'm waiting." He nodded, believed it instantly. Because I knew how to look like someone who was okay. I'd spent my whole life learning that skill. When he left, I stayed where I was, knees pulled up to my chest. And then, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel scared. I just felt empty. I knew they weren't coming back. I knew, because if I had ever mattered to them, they wouldn't have left me behind. And in that moment, I understood. I had 2 choices. Sit here forever, waiting for people who were never coming back, or get up and find my own way out. Not just out of this God-forsaken rest stop, but out of the prison called family that had held me captive for 21 years. And I stood up. I had been sitting there for nearly 2 hours, eyes fixed on the stretch of asphalt where the SUV had disappeared like some cruel magic trick. At first I tried to make excuses for them. Maybe they went back to the gas station. Maybe I took too long in the bathroom and they thought I was already in the car. Or maybe it was just a stupid misunderstanding. But the longer I sat, the colder it got, like a sheet of ice breaking inside me piece by piece. I couldn't pretend anymore. They had left me on purpose. I pulled my hand out of my jeans pocket, where my phone should have been. gone. Still plugged into the car that was now probably dozens of miles away if they hadn't stopped. No wallet, no ID, not a single cent in my pocket. I started to stand up, legs tingling from sitting too long. Strangers passed by, a few glanced and quickly turned away, avoiding trouble. I saw a little boy tug on his mother's hand and whisper, "Mommy, is that lady lost?" The woman with curly blonde hair frowned, like she was being bothered during a peaceful outing. But I didn't care about her expression. I needed help. And I had nothing left to lose. I stepped closer, my voice hoarse from a dry throat. "Excuse me, could I borrow your phone for just a minute? I got left behind." She froze, her eyes wide with suspicion. I looked like a drifter, messy hair, wrinkled shirt, sneakers worn nearly to the sole. But eventually, after a quick glance at her son holding her hand, she slowly nodded. "1 minute, okay?" I took the phone like it was the last lifeline left, but my fingers stopped at the dial screen. I had meant to call my dad, had meant to cry and beg him to come get me. But then, the images came crashing in like a hammer. My dad tossing my college application into the trash. Kevin laughing as he hid my winter coat in the snow. My mom sitting silently, pretending not to see as I got screamed at for breaking an old glass. I didn't call them. Instead, I took a deep breath, looked calmly at the woman in front of me. "Do you know if there's a shelter nearby? I need a place to stay tonight." She looked confused, clearly not what she was expecting. But then she composed herself and nodded. "I think there's one in Glenwood Springs, about a 40-minute drive from here, but I'm not sure." I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Could you take me there? I know it sounds weird, but I really don't have anyone else to call." She looked at me for a long time, like weighing pity against fear. The little boy tugged at her hand again and asked, "Mom, can we help her?" I swear it was that question that tipped the scale. The woman let out a quiet sigh and nodded. "Okay, but just to the front door, I can't stay long." "Thank you, really." I didn't say a word the entire ride. I sat in the back seat, staring out the window, unable to believe I was actually living this moment. Abandoned, empty-handed, and riding in a stranger's car like a homeless person. When we arrived, I got out and made sure to thank her again. The woman gave a slight nod, then drove off, leaving me in front of a small building with an old white sign that read, "Safe Haven Shelter." The door opened to reveal a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, wearing an old but clean button-up shirt. He looked me over from head to toe, and gently asked, "Do you need help?" I nodded, no tears, no shaking, just nodded. "Yes, I need a place to stay. I don't have any ID. I was left behind." He didn't ask any more questions. Didn't demand papers. Didn't look at me with pity. He just held out his hand. "Max, come in, young lady. We'll take care of things, one step at a time." As I stepped over the threshold, I had no idea what lay ahead. But one thing I knew for certain. I wasn't going back. No calls, no texts, no attempts to reconnect with people who had tossed me out like trash. I had been pushed out of the old world. Now it was time to find a new one, no matter how harsh it might be. I woke up the next morning on a rickety bunk bed in a small room shared with 3 other women. The mix of cleaning product and old sheets created a strange sensation. Unfamiliar, yet oddly safe. At least here, I wasn't called a burden. I wasn't yelled at for breathing the wrong way. Breakfast at the shelter was runny oatmeal and a bruised apple. I ate every bite. Not because it tasted good, but because I knew I needed the energy. And because today, I had to start over. Mr. Max, the shelter manager, let me use an old computer in the office to look things up. I searched for jobs that didn't require documentation, because everything I had, ID card, insurance, papers, had been in my dad's car. And now, I had nothing but my name. I typed into the search bar, "Cash Jobs, Grand Junction, Colorado." After an hour of sketchy listings, I stopped at one simple line. "Urgently hiring dishwasher, Sonny's Diner, cash pay, start immediately." The address was about 4 blocks away. I borrowed a hat from one of the women in the room, slipped on my nearly worn-out sneakers, and stepped onto the street, heart pounding like a war drum. Sonny's was a small diner with a sun-faded storefront and a tilted sign. The smell of fried grease and baked goods drifted out like a trap. I pushed open the door, and the little bell overhead rang like it was announcing that my life had just taken a sharp turn. The woman behind the counter looked to be in her 60s, short gray hair with streaks of soft purple. She wore a flour and coffee-stained apron and had a faded rose tattoo on her arm. I don't know why, but the moment I saw her, I felt a bit safer. I spoke up, my voice still shaky from fear of rejection. I saw the sign about needing a dishwasher. I need a job. Really need it. I don't have any papers right now. I lost everything. She looked me over from head to toe without blinking. I swallowed hard, bracing for a no. But instead, she said, "I'm Geraldine. The last dishwasher quit yesterday. If you steal, I'll roast you in the back. If you don't, get started. Gloves are in the 3rd drawer." I nodded, trying not to show the tears rising in my eyes. Geraldine didn't ask anything else, didn't pry, didn't pity. She gave me a chance. Plain and straight, just like her. I worked non-stop from noon until early evening. My hands blistered, shoulders ached, clothes soaked in sweat and soap, but when Geraldine shoved a $20 bill and a leftover meal into my hand, it felt like the biggest gift I'd ever received. That first week, I did everything she told me to. Dishes, mopping, wiping tables, even scrubbing toilets. I didn't complain. I didn't have the luxury of choice, and I didn't want another one. This was all I had, and I wasn't going to lose it. On the 7th day, Geraldine handed me a stack of papers. "These are forms to get your ID replaced." I called the records office back in Idaho. "They need an address to send it to. You can use the diners if you want. Just do it. Don't live like a ghost forever." I took the papers, hands trembling slightly. "Thank you." "I don't even know what to say," Geraldine growled. "Don't thank me, do good, you stay. Screw up, you're out. Got it?" But in her eyes, I saw something else. A kind of care I had never once received from my own blood. 3 days later, I bought a cheap prepaid phone from a store near the bus station. Holding that tiny device in my hand, I didn't plan to call anyone. I just needed something to remind me that I still existed. But then, that night, the phone rang. It was a call from an unknown number. I picked up. My mother's voice came through, shaky, like she'd been crying. "Harper? Is that you? Oh God, I was so worried about you, we thought you got lost. It was just a joke. Your dad said he turned back but didn't see you." I stood still in the storage room behind the diner, my ears burning. In the background, I clearly heard my father snap. "Don't blow this out of proportion, she's just sulking. Tell her to take a bus home." "She's grown." Then Kevin chimed in with a snicker. "Harper, come on, you've made your point. Who knew you were this dramatic?" I clenched the phone tightly. Not a single apology. Not a single sign they truly regretted it. I exhaled slowly, my voice strangely calm. "If your goal was to see if I could survive on my own, then congratulations, I'm doing it. And from now on, I'm never coming back." I hung up. Then I blocked the number. After that, I deleted every number I had memorized from my family. Each name I erased felt like cutting another chain that had bound me for 21 years. That night, I slept on a thin mattress in the small storage room behind the kitchen, the smell of old food still clinging to my shirt, but for the first time in my life, I felt free. That fall, I moved out of the shelter. With $300 saved from dishwashing and a few tips Geraldine stuffed into my pocket after overtime shifts, I rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The place had no AC, the window creaked every time the wind blew, and it always smelled faintly of downy. But it was the first thing I ever had that was mine. No one yelling at me every morning, no one stealing my stuff and pretending it never happened. I kept working at Sunny's, and before long, I wasn't just the nameless dishwasher anymore. After 2 months, Geraldine let me move up to prep cook. She taught me how to chop onions without losing a finger, how to flip eggs without breaking the yolk, and, most importantly, how to observe the whole kitchen like a conductor leading an orchestra. She said, "Harper, if you want to survive in this crazy world, you've got to learn to control every damn clink of a spoon on a plate. I see fire in your eyes. Don't let it go out." And I didn't let it go out. I started taking online classes at night. Nothing fancy like medicine or the arts. Just basic business management. Things like accounting, supply chains, how to run a small restaurant. I studied through long nights, my eyes burning after 10-hour shifts. But I didn't feel tired. I felt like I was making progress, little by little. Then Kendra showed up. She walked into Sunny's on a Tuesday afternoon, hair tied high, wearing headphones and holding a thick medical textbook. She ordered a Denver omelet, no tomatoes, and black coffee. The first time I served her, she didn't look at me, just said a quiet thanks and went back to reading. But I remembered her, and she started coming in regularly, every Tuesday and Thursday, always the same order, always the same seat by the counter. I started playing a dumb game. Every week I wore a different name tag. One week it was Amber, another week Cindy, and once I even put Banana. It took her 3 weeks to notice. And the first time Kendra looked up at me, she burst out laughing. "Is your name tag broken, or do you have an identity crisis?" I laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd had after a long cold year. We started dating. No roses, no fancy dinners, just pizza in the car, or coffee after a shift. 6 months later, Kendra moved into my tiny apartment. We took turns cooking, argued over who had to wash the dishes, and sometimes snuck up to the rooftop to stargaze. Even if we could only see 3 stars because of the town lights. Geraldine seemed to notice our relationship before I even did. One night she patted me on the shoulder after closing and said, "Kendra's a good one. But don't let her see your crazy face when you haven't had enough sleep." I laughed, shaking my head. Almost 3 years after I was left behind at that rest stop, Geraldine called me into the back office. She was sitting behind the desk, arms folded, her expression more serious than usual. "I'm thinking of opening another Sunny's on the east side of town. Older place, smaller. I don't need a co-owner, I need someone to run it. You want it?" I froze. "You mean, me? You think I was talking to the cat outside? You've been running this place for a year now. This is the test. Pass it, and you'll have something that's really yours. If not, I'll throw your ass back to dishwashing." I nodded, even as my heart pounded like a drum. Sunny's East opened 6 months later. Smaller, not fancy, but it was mine. I designed a new menu, managed the staff, handled orders, and even washed dishes when we were short-handed. The first 3 months, I worked nearly 90 hours a week. I lost weight, had dark circles under my eyes. But customers kept coming back, more than I ever expected. Harper, the girl once left on the side of the road like trash, was now running a real diner. And on a Saturday afternoon after locking up Sunny's East, I headed back to the apartment that still smelled like laundry, where Kendra was waiting. Hair messy, wearing my hoodie. She held me for a long time. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I had walked out of the wreckage and rebuilt myself, brick by brick, scar by scar. We got married on a June afternoon under the red maple trees in a state park. No fancy dress, no lavish party, and none of my blood family showed up. They weren't invited. Just Kendra, me, and the people we truly trusted. Geraldine made the wedding cake. Doug, the bass-playing neighbor, was the reluctant best man, and Kendra's parents stood there, tears streaming down their faces as their daughter said her vows. I never knew a hug could feel so gentle until Kendra's dad, Mr. Raymond, hugged me after the ceremony, patted my back, and said, "Welcome to the family. I don't care what your past looks like. From now on, you're ours." I nearly cried right then. Partly because I was touched, partly because no one had ever called me ours like that. With trust, and without conditions. Life didn't magically become perfect after we got married. But it started to settle. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near the park, with a tiny balcony just big enough for a few tomato pots. Kendra was still doing her residency, working long hours at the hospital, and I kept running Sunny's East. Our schedules were messy, but we made it a point to have dinner together at least 3 nights a week. Even if it was just sandwiches and instant noodles. Then Ellie was born. She was a little storm wrapped in a yellow blanket. I remember holding her for the first time, my arms trembling, scared I might drop her. She looked up at me like she was asking, "Daddy, are we gonna be okay?" And I whispered, "I promise, no matter what, you'll never be left behind." 2 years later, Marcus came into the world during a thunderstorm. He was a tiny copy of Kendra. Deep brown eyes, a little frown when things didn't go his way, and a cry loud enough to wake the neighborhood. I never thought I'd be a father. In the past, whenever someone mentioned family, my chest would tighten, like it was a concept I'd never reach. But then, one late night, while changing Marcus's diaper under a dim nightlight, Ellie waddled into the room, clutching her teddy bear, yawning. She looked at me and asked, "Daddy, can I sleep in your room?" I lifted her onto the bed, tucked in both kids and lay between them, holding my whole world in my arms. Family. No longer a place filled with shouting, judgmental stares or cold silence. Now it was the sound of my daughter giggling when I used my monster voice. The scent of Kendra's hair when she fell asleep on the couch after a long shift. The tiny hand of Marcus, reaching for mine in his sleep. Every weekend, Kendra's parents came by. Her mom Doris brought pastries, lemonade and a mountain of parenting tips she collected from YouTube. Mr. Raymond read the paper, occasionally glancing up to ask, "How's Sunny's doing, son? Let me know if you need help fixing anything at the diner." We celebrated Christmas with Kendra's family, played gift hunt in the backyard, baked gingerbread cookies, and sang carols under strings of twinkling lights. I used to think those things only existed in movies, but now, they were my reality. One morning while driving Ellie to preschool, she suddenly asked, "Daddy, was your old house like ours?" I nearly swerved out of the lane. I stayed quiet for a few seconds, then answered, "No, Ellie, my old house wasn't like ours. No one laughed, no one hugged. But now it's different. Our house has all of that." Ellie smiled, nodded, like she understood. And in the morning sunlight pouring through the windshield, I realized I had rewritten the meaning of family for myself. We don't get to choose where we're born. But I chose who gets to be in my life. And for the first time, I didn't feel like someone on the outside looking in at the lights. I was home. I had found my real family. One where love didn't come with conditions. Wasn't bound by blood, but built on trust, forgiveness, and choosing each other. Every single day. It was a Thursday afternoon, mid-shift, when Maya, the new employee at Sunny's East, called into the kitchen, her voice slightly awkward. Harper, someone's here, asking for you. They said they're family." I wiped my hands on my apron, my heart tightening instinctively. Family. A word I'd learned to tuck away in the darkest corner of memory for over 10 years. As I stepped outside, the world seemed to slow down. Standing in front of me was Carl, my father now clearly aged. Thinning hair, slightly hunched back, but still with that old air of authority in his eyes. Susan, my mother, stood slightly behind him, clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Kevin, my brother, looked the same, tall, shifty-eyed, hands in the pockets of a leather jacket like he was about to step onto a stage, and beside him stood a young woman I'd never met. Perfectly made-up face, lips pressed tight. Probably Poppy, Kevin's second wife. I stood still, saying nothing. No smile, no tears. Carl broke the silence with a low, hoarse voice. "Harper, is that you?" I nodded coldly. "Yes. I'm Harper. As for who you are, I'm not so sure." No one answered. Susan brought a hand to her mouth trying to hold back tears. Kevin glanced around the diner, flicked his eyes toward the menu. Anything to avoid mine. Poppy leaned closer to her husband, clearly uncomfortable. Carl spoke again. We need to talk. We're family after all. I looked them over once, then turned to Maya. That corner table, bring them water. We sat down, no one touched their glass. Kevin tried to smile. This place looks nice. You own it? I didn't answer. I looked straight at Carl. Why now? Susan pulled out a stack of papers and handed them to me. Hospital documents. Carl had heart failure, no insurance, the house had been foreclosed. Kevin was unemployed after 3 failed investments. Susan needed knee replacement surgery, but couldn't afford it. I placed the papers on the table without opening them. 15 years, not a single text, not one phone call, and now you show up? Because you need money? Kevin forced a smile, trying to keep it friendly. We're family, Harper. Family helps each other. I tilted my head. Family? Like that time you left me in the middle of Colorado, no wallet, no phone, then drove off like it was some joke on a stray dog? Carl slammed his hand on the table. We came back to look, you disappeared, how were we supposed to know where you went? I sat there for 3 hours, Carl. No one came back. No one cared. Susan began to cry, real tears, I think this time. I've regretted it every single year. I kept thinking you'd call. And when I didn't, no one ever called me either. Because maybe my silence was easier than the truth. I've lived without you. Kevin cleared his throat. Look, now's not the time to dig up the past. Dad's really sick. Mom's not getting any younger. If you can help, help. If not? I stood up before he could finish. Dinner. My house, 6 o'clock. But don't expect what you think you're getting. When they came to my house that evening, Kendra had set the table. Ellie and Marcus sat beside me, eyeing the unfamiliar faces with quiet suspicion. Carl tried to speak to Marcus, but the boy clung tightly to my hand. Ellie stepped behind her mom. Kendra smiled politely, but her eyes were sharp as knives. She knew everything, every single thing. The dinner was tense. No one ate much. Kevin rambled about the meaning of family. Susan kept dabbing at her tears. Poppy was almost completely silent, except when asking for salt. When the kids went upstairs, I stood, went into the office, and came back with an envelope. I set it down in front of Carl. He opened it. A check. $73.50. Carl frowned. What the hell is this? A Greyhound bus ticket from Glenwood Springs to Idaho, 2009. The exact amount a girl who was abandoned would have needed to get home. I didn't use it. Now I'm giving it back to you. The room fell silent. Then Carl growled. You ungrateful brat, we're your parents. I replied, my voice low but razor sharp. You're the people who gave birth to me, but family? No. Family doesn't abandon each other. Family doesn't come back after 15 years just to ask for money. Susan burst into sobs. Kevin stood up, pulling Poppy with him. Carl crushed the check in his hand, threw it on the floor and pointed at me. You'll regret this. You think you're better than us? I didn't answer. I simply opened the door and stepped aside. Good luck to you. As the sound of their car faded into the night, I turned around and saw Kendra standing on the stairs. She asked quietly, You okay? I nodded, but inside, I wasn't sure if it was relief, or if the pain I'd buried for so long had just finally cracked open. One thing I did know, the past no longer held any power over me. I stood behind the closed door, feeling hollow, like all the air in the house had just been sucked out. Outside, the car's engine hummed once more before disappearing into the dark. The crumpled check still lay on the doorstep, stark white like an old stain dragged back into the present. But I didn't pick it up. Kendra walked over and placed a hand on my back. Want to say anything? I shook my head. My throat felt blocked. Not with tears, but with a final memory that had just evaporated out of me. We cleaned up dinner in silence. The clink of dishes was the only sound in a kitchen that used to be full of our kids' laughter. When I took the trash out, I glanced out the window. they were gone. No text, no apology, no turning back. But this time, I knew I was the one who had turned away first. That night, when Ellie rolled over, fast asleep, and Marcus rested his head on my arm, I looked at their peaceful faces and felt lighter with every breath. These kids would grow up in a world with no yelling, no cruel jokes that left scars. They'd know they were loved. Not because they pleased anyone, but simply because they were themselves. I sat up, pulled out my phone, and logged into the old email I hadn't touched in over a decade, the one I'd long forgotten. No new messages, just a pile of spam and familiar subject lines from my mom. We need to talk. Family is still family. Your father's not well. I deleted them all, no opening, no reading. Next, I logged into an old social media account. In a community group from my old town, I saw a few posts from Carl, complaining about hospitals, whining about neighbors, and one recent post. Looking for daughter, Harper Lynn, been out of touch for a long time, if anyone knows anything please contact. I calmly deactivated the account. Permanently. The next day, I went to Sunny's East as usual. When I walked in, Geraldine was already at the last table with her black coffee and her signature sharp stare. She motioned for me to come over. I heard from Maya there was a storm at the diner last night. I gave a half smile. Old tornado. Already passed. She nodded, then patted the seat next to her. Good. You know, some things aren't worth holding on to too long. Trash has to be taken out before it starts to stink up your heart. I sat down, took a deep breath. I know, and this time, I'm not letting it come back. Geraldine didn't say anything else. She simply slid a piece of paper toward me. The plan for Sunny's third location. This time I'd be a co-investor, not just the manager. I smiled and signed, without hesitation. That evening, when I got home, Ellie was coloring at the table and Marcus was lost in a pile of building blocks. Kendra sat on the couch, holding a cup of tea, looking at me with a soft smile. I walked over, sat beside her and whispered, I buried the past. I'm not letting it rot anymore. Kendra tilted her head. What about the future? What are you going to do with that? I pulled her closer, kissed her forehead. Build it, with my own hands, with you, with our kids, and I won't let anyone tear it down. That night I lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about the day I was left at that nameless rest stop. No wallet, no phone, no one on my side. I'd thought I would die there. If not my body, then the part of me that had been squeezed until it went numb. But I stood up. I didn't go back, I didn't beg. I didn't return to that house. I built a real home of my own. A place where laughter wasn't paired with cruelty. A home where no one had to be afraid just to exist. A life lived by choice, not guilt, not shame, not the weight of the past. And that was the greatest victory of my life. Not because I got revenge, but because I survived. And lived better than anyone ever thought I could. Harper's story is proof that family doesn't always mean safety, and blood doesn't always mean love. Abandoned, hurt, and discarded, Harper didn't crumble. She rose, and built a life from the ruins. She showed that happiness isn't found where we're born, but where we choose to belong. The past may be painful, but we have the power to rewrite our story. With love, strength, and true freedom. What do you think about Harper's journey? What would you have done in her place? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional and inspiring stories about family and life.